be real specific and go ahead and take you back to May 24th of 2022. Are you the mother of Chloe? And for the record, can you spell Chloe's first name?
Khloie.
And what grade was Chloe in on May 24th of 2022?
Fourth.
And how old was Chloe at the time?
10.
And what school was she going to on that date?
Robb Elementary.
And what grade was she in?
Fourth.
And do you recall what room she was in at Robb Elementary?
112.
Now, you were not at school that day?
No.
And was there something special about this going on at school that day that she was excited about?
Yes.
And what was that?
Sorry. She was excited. She had left early that day to get bubbles and watch a movie after awards. And so she was excited for that.
And did she receive an award that day?
She did.
And what was that award?
The Good Citizen Award.
Now, at some point, did you receive a text message from the school?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember what that message was?
Yes, that the school went into a lockdown and to stay away from the premises, that everything was under control.
At some point, did you receive some information that was a little bit more than a regular lockdown?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the information that you received?
That there was, well, at first I think it said it was a bailout to stay away, and then another one came in and said active shooter.
Okay. Now, when were you able to see Chloe on May 24th?
It was after she came home from the hospital because I was out of town.
And she was at the hospital for physical injuries that she suffered?
Yes.
And can you describe for the jury what those injuries are or were?
Yes, she had bullet fragments in her forehead and in her left thigh.
Now, those bullet fragments in her head, do they still exist today?
Yes.
What about the ones in her leg?
Yes.
And does she suffer from the fragments in her head?
Yes, she gets headaches frequently. And then in her leg, if she walks kind of far, sometimes she'll say that she has to stop because her leg was hurt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you decided if you will remove the shrapnel, or are you going to leave it?
As of right now, they don't want to mess with it because it's sitting to where it's able to stay. They did say if it was to move, then they would go ahead, but as of now, they think she's fine with it in there.
Okay. I'm going to leave it at that. Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Ms. Torres, I'm very grateful to Chloe that you still have her, because as we know, a lot of people don't. So I hope she continues to be a blessing to you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thanks.
Pass it.
Okay, recall either side.
No recall, Your Honor.
No, Judge.
Okay, ma'am, you are released from the subpoena and you are excused. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
State calls Jennifer Havy. Step out real quick.
Yes. solemnly swear the evidence in the testimony that you give in this cause will be the truth, so help you God. Have a seat right over here. That microphone will adjust, make it comfortable, and speak up so everybody can hear you, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please state your name for the record.
Jennifer Havy,
And Ms. Havy, where are you currently employed?
Bluebonnet Children's Advocacy Center.
And what is your job position there?
I'm a licensed professional counselor.
And where did you go to college at?
Texas State University and then Sul Ross University.
And you got your bachelor's degree from Texas State?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was that in?
Education.
And what did you get from Sul Ross University?
Master's of Education and Counseling.
Okay. And did you previously work for the Uvalde Independent School District?
Yes.
And what did you work as?
I was a teacher.
And was that before you obtained your master's?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And are you a licensed professional counselor?
Yes, ma'am, through the state of Texas.
Okay. And are you licensed by the Texas Board of Professional Counselors?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're current on your licensing?
Yes, ma'am.
At this point, Your Honor, the state would tender Jennifer Havy as an expert in post-traumatic stress disorder counseling.
We're not in federal court. I don't know that the court can do that, but I
Do you
will.
have any questions on?
Yeah, as a voir dire, I will say that I will agree that she is good at what she does and that she has every right to testify about what she did.
All right, so you may proceed.
Ms. Havy, can you, where are you currently employed at?
Right now, Bluebonnet Children's Advocacy Center.
Okay, and for the jury and for the record, can you explain what the Bluebonnet Children's Advocacy Center is?
Yes, it gives a safe place for children to come and talk about their trauma, abuse, and then through that, and so the child doesn't have to say things over and over again. They say it one time to an interviewer, and through that, officers, medical, CPS all work together through the investigation, and then they offer mental health services to the child, for the child.
So at the Children's Advocacy Center, you deal with clients, patients who suffer abuse or trauma of some sort?
Yes.
Okay. And through that, have you provided counseling to some of the survivors in this case?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Now, and for the record, those medical records and counseling records have already been admitted into evidence, okay? So what I want you to do, though, is can you explain to the jury what is post-traumatic stress disorder?
PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It is ongoing stress after the traumatic event.
And how does that manifest itself? What are the symptoms of PTSD?
It can manifest itself in many ways, through the body, through headaches, stomach aches, nausea, as well as wanting to leave your home or not being able to leave your home, socially, trust with others,
And we call that disassociation.
dissociation.
Is that what it's called? Okay. And do you also see children with anxiety and depression that are suffering from PTSD?
Both, yes.
Okay. And are these considered a disorder
Yes.
or an impairment of some sort?
Disorder, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what are the different ways that these are explained through children with PTSD? In other words, do they express it through like guilt, or I mean, how does that work?
Through PTSD, can you repeat your question? Just so I'm answering it.
Right. Well, if they have PTSD, do they also have maybe other impairments? Such as
Yes, I apologize. Yes, usually with PTSD, anxiety comes as well with it, hand in hand, only because the stress, your body becomes alert, hyper alert, and stress rises, and that brings on anxiety.
Okay. Do you know what survivor's guilt is?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain that to the jury?
Yes, it's when a survivor feels guilty for living.
And have you seen that through some of your patients through their counseling?
That's me.
Now, what is a triggering event?
It's when something happens that escalates anxiety in their body. It's when you're triggered by something and it brings you back to whatever traumatic event they had.
Is it a sensation that stimulates the nervous system?
Yes.
And is it a biological response in a child?
Yes.
And can you explain that?
It's an automatic response in the body. It's not something that's they think of. It's protection. So it's dissociation, it's protection.
And what can be a triggering event in a child with PTSD?
I've seen many things that trigger children right now. I'm seeing helicopters, loud noises, trigger children, colors,
What colors?
red.
Why red?
It's the color of blood.
Okay. And explain to the jury what these triggers do. What do they do in a child physically that they're called triggering events? What do they do?
Some children, when triggered, they might cry. Their heart might race. They might get under a table and not want to leave. They might want to hold someone's hand for safety. I have many clients I'm trying to go through, so many of them.
Well, do these triggering events take the child back to the trauma that was suffered?
Yes.
Okay. And is the child able to differentiate between where they are now versus the traumatic event?
Not always. It brings them back to the event, and their brain believes, or their brain is saying, no, this is happening, although they know obviously it's not happening over and over again, but they believe it is. Their body feels it is, as if it's happening.
Now, what type of techniques do you use in providing treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder?
So I work with children and adolescents with PTSD, and we use sensory boxes, art, breathing techniques, reframing, like rewriting or rethinking the trauma, knowing it's not there any longer, narrative, oral and written.
Is one of these things you do called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing?
EMDR, yes ma'am.
Okay.
That is evidence-based treatment.
And can you explain to the jury what that is and how it works?
Sure. It's bilateral stimulation of the brain, which it's used to reprocess the trauma they've had. So, although, may I give an example?
Yes.
Although they know the trauma has already passed, after EMDR, and bilateral stimulation just means back and forth with the brain, after EMDR, then they're able to talk about the trauma and it doesn't affect them as much. So their nervous system is a little de-escalated, I should say.
Okay. And what are the things you do with that? I mean, what specific techniques do you use?
So you can use is eye movement. So you can use a light bar where they follow the light back and forth. Or with my age, we use a lot of tappers, and all that's doing is buzzing their hand like left, right, and that's bilateral stimulation of the brain, which helps reprocess the trauma. That's what it's used for.
And what is TFCBT?
Trauma focused cognitive behavior therapy. It is for children and adolescents to, at their own pace, walk through their trauma. with coping skills, narratives, and so forth.
Now, is post-traumatic stress disorder, is that something that can be eventually treated, and or how does that work?
Treated, yes. Both TFCBT and EMDR are both evidence-based for PTSD for children and adolescents. So PTSD can be treated, yes. People do heal from PTSD, although it is always ongoing. And when I say that, that sounds kind of backwards, but what I'm saying is it does not affect them as much, because our goal, or my goal as a therapist would be that they're able to hopefully function day to day in their living, live a healthier day than they did the day of the trauma, right? Making progress.
Is there a permanent brain injury associated with PTSD?
Yes.
And again, you treated some of the survivors in room 112, is that right? That's a witness, Your Honor.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Havy,
Yes, sir.
my name's Jason Goss. I'm one of the attorneys for Adrian, and I want to start out by saying thank you. I mean, I know it's difficult even for treaters and providers, because you're having to experience that with kids, right? So there's a secondary trauma that goes on with you as you're having to work through that. The fact you're willing to do that is important. So thank you for that. I did want to talk, not necessarily, I know that we talked about, yes, you've treated some of the kids. Are they all confined to 111 and who were in 111 and 112? Or were there some other kids at Robb that day that have also come in for treatment?
I treat many kids from Robb.
So not necessarily even the ones that were in the room
Not necessarily.
with the shooter. And that's because, and the point I'm trying to make with that is that's because you can get anybody that's involved in that situation can have PTSD for that situation.
Yes, sir.
Including the officers,
Yes, sir.
including the witnesses, the teachers, the adult. You would agree with that?
Anyone in a traumatic event.
Sure. And I guess and I didn't hear, I know you worked at well, I call it CAC, but a child advocacy center.
Yes, sir.
Do you ever do forensic interviews, or are you just the counseling side of that?
On the counseling side, so after the forensic interviewer, then the client is passed to me
Okay.
for therapy.
And it sounds like you have a lot of experience with PTSD and trauma and talking to people who have suffered trauma. So I want to ask you some questions about your understanding of the medicine and the science in your discipline, and as far as like what you have been able to learn about how people who experience trauma, I guess, relate and talk about it. Okay? So you would agree that, like with the kids you've worked with the adults you've worked with, who has experienced that kind of trauma, the next day after that is not, they're not 100% accurately recalling everything that's happened perfectly, because trauma affects memory and stress affects memory.
Trauma does affect memory.
It does, right?
Correct.
And you know that. And so asking somebody the next day who's gone through a situation like that what happened, you might not get exactly what happened or exactly in the right order or exactly in the right times, right? Because if they've gone through a stressful event like that that has caused trauma, then their recall of that can be inaccurate. You would agree with that?
You might not. Every person's different.
Sure. And just so you know, I'm not talking about any of your kids or any of those kids at Robb. I'm not talking about any of their statements or anything about them. I'm using your experience to talk about, because there are other witnesses and other people that were at the scene who
Yes, sir.
also kind of went through this. You see what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the stress, you know that stress can be, like maybe you know, maybe you don't, but stress can cause things like auditory exclusion when it's happening. It can cause time compression when it's happening. Those kind of things can happen as the person is witnessing an event if it's a high stress or traumatic event.
Yes, sir.
Right. And so Sometimes they don't hear things that you would think that they hear. Sometimes they mix things up, like what order things were in, right?
Yes.
You would agree with that because, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but even people who, somebody can be absolutely sure of something and then see a video that didn't happen the way they thought it happened, but in their mind, because of the way their memory has been kind of forged into trauma, in their mind it happened this way, even if there was evidence that they could see that it didn't happen that way. And that's because that's how people process in trauma. You would agree with that?
That's how trauma works.
Right. So, and that's all I'm trying to point out is that it is hard. It is hard with witnesses and other people to get sometimes accurate recounting if they've gone through a traumatic event.
As a therapist, I'm not there for accuracy. I'm here to work on their healing.
100%. But I think one of the things you do want them to do is process by, like you said, you use different techniques to process by remembering or recounting the trauma or going through and talking about their trauma. And like I said, it's not up to you, or you don't care whether they're accurate. But you don't care if they're accurate about what they're saying. You want them to process it therapeutically.
Correct.
Right. But your experience and understanding of how trauma works and how stress works on memory and recalling and recounting is really what I'm going to. Like, that it can affect those different things. It's a physiological effect that happens to people.
Yes.
Right. I'll pass it later. And thank you again.
No more questions, Judge, and she's excused.
Not subject to recall, Mr. Goss?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. You are excused, not subject to recall. Thank you very much.
Mike Westall,